Hello everyone, today I'm going to be talking about the themes expressed in The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. The Handmaid's Tale takes place after the United States has fallen, overthrown by an authoritarian, theocratic regime founded on rigid Christian principles and the disempowerment of women, which has installed a new nation called Gilead in its place. The novel begins with Fred, the narrator and main character of the story, remembering her restricted life at the Rachel and Lee Center, a training camp for handmaids in an old high school. While her real name isn't actually Fred, all handmaids are given the name of, followed by their commander's name. The scene changes to her current residence, where she lives with the commander and his wife, Serena Joy. Fred puts on a red uniform and goes on a shopping trip with another handmaid named Glenn. Afterwards, they stop by the wall to look at the bodies of recently executed men. In the evening, Fred lies in bed. She remembers her spunky friend Moira, her activist mother, and the loss of her daughter and her husband Luke. She thinks about the previous handmaid who left a Latin message scratched into the wall. She then thinks about her trip to the doctor on the previous day. The doctor suggested that her commander might be sterile and offers to have sex with her. Though her life depends on getting pregnant, Fred refuses the offer, as having sex with the doctor could have resulted in serious trouble and punishment. She takes a bath and thinks about her daughter, the hysterical handmaid Janine, and after that, she and the rest of the members of the household gather to listen to the commander read the Bible. Then the commander's wife Serena Joy, and Fred performed the ceremony. This consisted of the commander having impersonal sex with Fred while she lies between Serena Joy's legs. Afterwards, Fred sneaks downstairs in a rebellious gesture and runs into Nick, who gives her a message from the commander to meet the following night. The next day, Fred and other handmaids attend Janine's birth. In the afternoon, Fred remembers how Moira managed to escape from Rachel and Lee Center disguised as an aunt. Then later in the evening, she sees the commander, who surprisingly only wants to play Scrabble and get a kiss. Afterwards, she can't stop laughing, and as time passes, Fred and the commander meet often. Because of this, the ceremony becomes less impersonal for Fred, now that she and the commander know each other. As Fred and Glenn go shopping regularly, Glenn reveals that she's part of a secret organized resistance called Mayday. After, Fred recalls the events that led from the U.S. government to the Republic of Gilead. It started with the massacre of the President and Congress, then came a succession of restrictive measures imposed for safety, and eventually the removal of all power and rights for women. One night, the commander explains the meaning of the previous handmaid's Latin, and Fred learns that the previous handmaid hanged herself. After a shopping trip one day, Serena Joy tells Fred to have sex with Nick in an effort to get pregnant, and Fred agrees. Fred and Glenn attend a pravaganza celebrating arranged marriages. Afterwards, Serena Joy shows Fred a photo of her daughter. That night, the commander gives Fred a skimpy outfit and makeup, and Nick drives him to a nightclub filled with prostitutes. Fred spots Moira across her room and they meet in the bathroom. Moira reveals that she spent many months on the run before she was captured. Fred and the commander get a room and have sex, and Fred has to fake arousal. Shortly after returning home, Serena Joy leads Fred to Nick, and Fred doesn't have to fake arousal this time. Time passes, and Fred sees Nick often. She becomes so obsessed with him that she doesn't want to leave or help Glenn with resistance efforts. Later, Fred and Glenn attend a women's salvaging, where 3 women are hanged. Afterwards, they take part in group execution of a supposed rapist who was actually a member of the resistance. The following day, a new handmaid comes for the shopping trip with Fred. She says that the old Glenn committed suicide when the Eyes, who were the secret police of Gilead, came to get her. When Fred returns home, after shopping, Serena Joy confronts her with the skimpy outfit and threatens to punish her. Fred goes to her room and sees the Eyes coming for her. Nick tells her that they're secretly members of the resistance, and she enters their van unsure of her fate. The novel ends at a history conference in 2195 where many academics and scientists talk about Gilead and the story of Alfred. In the end, it is unclear whether Alfred managed to successfully escape or if she was eventually recaptured. There are many interesting and topical themes explored throughout The Handmaid's Tale, such as religion and society, complacency to government, and equality between genders. One of the major themes in The Handmaid's Tale is religion. Gilead is a theocracy, a government where church and state are combined. Religious language enters into every part of society, from Rita's position as a Martha, named for a New Testament kitchen worker, to store names like milk and honey. And religion, specifically the Old Testament, is also just the justification for many of Gilead's most savage characteristics. Alfred's job as a handmaid is based on the biblical precedent of Rachel and Leah, where fertile servants can carry on adulterous relationships to allow infertile women like the commander's wife to have families. Each month before the ceremony, the commander reads from Genesis the same lines that make the book's epigraph, justifying and moralizing the crude intercourse that will take place. Yet many of the biblical quotes in the book are twisted. The theocracy is so rigid about its religious influences and so emphatic about the specific rules it upholds that it even warps essential virtues from the Bible like charity, tolerance, and forgiveness. Alfred knows that the prayers that the aunts play the handmaids in the Rachel and Leah Center are not the words that actually appear in the Bible, but she has no way of checking. The salvagings and executions are supposedly the penalty for biblical sins like adultery, but Alfred knows that others are executed for resisting the government. The Handmaid's Tale is not a criticism of the Bible in itself, but a criticism of the way that people and theocracies use the Bible for their own oppressive purposes, and how religion can be used for evil just as easily as it can be used for good. Another major theme explored in the novel is the danger of complacency. Being set in a totalitarian regime, in a sense, everyone is required to be passive in The Handmaid's Tale, but women have it worse because they no longer have any financial or social power. The aunts at the Red Center may be a bit of an exception, but even they are subject to limits. In order to survive in the Republic of Gilead, characters have to be blank slates. They have to be willing to take on new names and go where they're told. They can't complain if their children are taken from them or cry over their loved ones' sad fates. Acting out, even by doing something as seemingly harmless as reading, results in brutal punishment or even death. During the scene where Alfred and Elfglen are standing by the wall, looking at the bodies of people who had been hanged by Gilead, Alfred recalls a quotation from her time at the Red Center when Aunt Lydia had told her that life in Gilead would eventually become normal. When Alfred sees the bodies on the wall, she is initially horrified, but then she substitutes her repulsion for a sense of emotional blankness. As she represses her natural disgust, she remembers Aunt Lydia's words. This suggests that people will endure oppression willingly and will become adjusted to drastic changes as long as they believe that what they are living in is normal. The authority in Gilead is able to convince everyone that what they live in is normal, and so everyone becomes complacent and there is no one to stand up to the government. Lastly is gender equality, or more specifically, the lack of it. Gilead is a strictly hierarchical society with huge difference between the genders. As soon as the Gileadian revolutionaries take over after terrorism destroys the U.S. government, they fire all women from their jobs and drain their bank accounts. Soon Gileadian women find all liberties taken from them, from the right to choose their clothes to the right to read. Even women in positions of power, like Aunt Lydia, are only allowed cattle prods and never guns. The commander's wife, once a powerful supporter of far right-wing religious ideas about how women should stay at home, now finds herself unhappily trapped in the world she advocated for. Gilead also institutionalizes sexual violence towards women. The ceremony, where the commander tries to impregnate Alfred, is institutionalized adultery and rape. Jezebel's, where Moira works, is a brothel for society's elite. Towards the end of chapter 32, the commander tries to justify some of this inequality to Alfred. He suggests that feminism and gender equality left men without a purpose in life, with their former roles as women's protectors taken away, and with women suddenly behaving as equals, men were set adrift. By making themselves soldiers, providers, and caretakers of society again, men have meaning restored to their lives. And while this almost sounds noble, in order to give meaning back to men's lives, both men and women have lost all freedoms, and the benefits of the new society are far outweighed by the cost it imposes on its citizens. And the theme of gender equality explored throughout the novel is actually quite topical right now, as certain states in the U.S. move to ban abortion and take away women's rights to make decisions regarding their own bodies. It's actually quite relevant. I've included a short video on the current situation with abortion bans in the U.S., as it's a good way to tie the story into real life. There are many critics of these abortion bans, even comparing what is going on to the possible start of a Gilead-esque society in America. And while that may be a bit of a stretch at the moment, small steps in the wrong direction can lead to a slippery slope.
The Missouri Senate passed a bill today banning most abortions after 8 weeks. The governor's already said he'll sign it. That came a day after Alabama's governor signed a bill outlawing nearly all abortions. There are no exceptions for rape or incest, just for, quote, serious health risks to the mother. And doctors that end pregnancies could face prison time. The bills are part of a wider attack on abortion rights. State lawmakers have introduced at least 250 bills restricting abortion this year. 7 states have passed laws stripping abortion rights in some way, and more could be coming soon. The laws may never take effect. They're all expected to be challenged in court. That's the point. The lawmakers and activists pushing them say their goal is getting to the Supreme Court, where they hope a conservative majority will overturn Roe v. Wade. That prospect is frightening for some voters here in Georgia, where lawmakers recently passed their own bill. No abortions allowed after a heartbeat is detectable at 6 weeks in.
A death warrant has been signed by Governor Kemp for all women of Georgia. Make no mistake, 2020 is coming, and the Republicans in office will feel the voting power of women.
Democrats clearly see an opening. 2020 candidates rushed to Twitter when news broke about Alabama's ban. And Senator Kirsten Gillibrand traveled to Atlanta today for a roundtable with medical professionals, activists, and lawmakers.
I was the first presidential candidate to roll out a robust reproductive rights agenda. I will make it clear, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that women in this country have a guaranteed right to an abortion. Second, I will end the Hyde Amendment, which disproportionately blocks women of color and women with low incomes from getting access to abortion services. And I can tell you one thing, if this is the fight that President Trump wants, if this is a fight that he wants with the American people, if this is a fight he wants with America's women, it is a fight he will have, and it is a fight he will lose.
Is this a political advantage for Democrats right now that this is so in the forefront of the news?
I don't see it in those terms. I think this is truly a life or death issue. You heard from doctors today about patients who lost their lives when abortion services weren't available and weren't readily available. You also heard from providers that if you're a Black woman in America today, your maternal mortality rate is so much higher than white women because of institutional racism. You heard from providers that if these laws pass, if you're white and privileged, you'll be able to get access because you have the means. But if you're poor and a person of color, likely you won't. And that's wrong. It's morally wrong. And we're dividing this country further and further.
The front runner in this race right now, former Vice President Joe Biden, has a squishy history on how he feels about abortion. And through his time in the Senate, he voted against some measures giving women all the access that they need to abortion and federal funding for abortion. Do you think he's progressive enough on this issue and protecting women enough on this?
I don't think there can be a Democratic nominee that is not 100% and unapologetically pro-choice. I don't think there's room for it. I don't think there's room for it in our party.
Do you think that's Joe Biden right now?
I don't know. You can ask him. But I know where I am. I am 100% pro-choice because the truth is it's a human right and it's a civil right. And I run campaigns across the country against pro-life Democrats.
But in Georgia, at least among these women, the outrage isn't fading anytime soon.
Do you worry about the Supreme Court?
I'm terrified about the Supreme Court. Right now, our only hope is that Chief Justice Roberts doesn't want his court to be the one that takes away women's reproductive rights. That is our only hope.
Okay, moving on. I found that The Handmaid's Tale was an okay read. I found the novel was actually a bit long, and I did find myself a little bit bored at times reading due to this. However, I have very high level of respect for the quality of writing in the novel, and the story does explore many relevant and topical themes and ideas, meaning that it remains a classic almost 35 years since it was originally published. And it is not the most action-packed or entertaining novel, but I still would recommend it for really anyone to read it, because, as I said, it is a classic and it's very topical right now. I've included some discussion questions on this slide. Feel free to read them over. Let me know your opinions. Thank you so much for watching my presentation on the themes in The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood.